Steven Tyler just did something that has never happened in 52 years of rock and roll history. The man who screamed his way through every controversy, every industry battle, every personal crisis with that trademark Aerosmith swagger, just released a statement about Roger Waters that's so absolutely devastating. It makes Waters' attack on Ozzy look like a love letter. And this wasn't some rambling, drug-fueled rant from rock's most unpredictable frontman. This was a calculated, surgical strike from someone who's been watching Roger Waters destroy American rock legends for 4 decades and finally decided that silence was no longer an option. Because when Steven Tyler finally chooses to annihilate someone, he doesn't just throw rocks from the stage. He brings down the entire arena. Here's what Tyler said, and I'm reading this directly from his official statement released just hours ago. Roger Waters has spent 40 years trying to convince the world that American rock is inferior to his pretentious British art project. His attack on Ozzy's legacy isn't grief or artistic criticism. It's the final move in a campaign he's been running since 1981 to eliminate every authentic American rock voice that threatens his carefully constructed narrative about what rock music should be. Now, if you know anything about Steven Tyler, you know this statement is absolutely unprecedented. This is the man who turned every controversy into a performance, who made peace with enemies on stage, who transformed personal disasters into platinum albums. Tyler has built his entire reputation on being unpredictably authentic, someone who says exactly what he feels in the moment without calculating the consequences. But this statement wasn't spontaneous Tyler chaos. This was strategic Tyler warfare, and the difference is terrifying. The language was too precise, too perfectly crafted to destroy Waters' credibility as someone who cares about artistic integrity. This was a planned execution from someone who's been documenting Waters' behavior for decades, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal everything. Tyler didn't stop with defending Ozzy's memory. He made this personal in a way that shocked everyone who thought they knew his character. Roger Waters represents everything poisonous about artistic elitism. He builds walls between himself and authentic human expression, then attacks other artists for having the genuine connection to their audience that he's incapable of understanding. Ozzy Osbourne spent his life creating honest moments between performers and fans, the kind of authentic relationship Roger could never achieve because he's too busy protecting his intellectual superiority to actually feel anything real. The rock world's reaction was immediate and explosive. Within hours, Tyler's statement was trending globally, with major American rock artists either rallying to support him or completely stunned that the unpredictable Aerosmith frontman had delivered such a methodical character assassination. But what really sent shockwaves through the industry was the realization that if Steven Tyler felt strongly enough to abandon his usual chaotic authenticity for strategic warfare, then Roger Waters must have crossed a line that goes far beyond his comments about Ozzy. Here's the part that's got industry insiders completely baffled. Tyler's statement wasn't reactive emotional grief about Waters attacking his fellow rock legend. The timing was too perfect, the language too calculated, the strategy too sophisticated to be spontaneous Tyler emotion. This was planned destruction from someone who's been thinking about this moment for a very long time. The most telling detail is how Tyler positioned his attack. He didn't just defend Ozzy's legacy as a fellow rock survivor. He used Waters' behavior toward Ozzy as evidence of a much larger pattern of systematic destruction that Tyler has apparently been documenting since the early 80s. This wasn't about defending a friend's memory. This was about finally exposing someone whose campaign against American rock authenticity Tyler has been fighting privately for 40 years. Because here's what nobody's talking about yet. Steven Tyler and Roger Waters have serious history. Complicated, decades-old history that's been carefully hidden from public view. And Tyler's decision to finally abandon his trademark chaos for strategic warfare suggests that Waters' attack on Ozzy was just the final insult in a conflict that goes back to the founding days of MTV and the battle for rock music's cultural dominance. The timing of Tyler's statement is also significant. He waited until Waters had already shown his worst side to the world, until public opinion was already questioning Waters' character, until the perfect moment to deliver a killing blow that would do maximum damage to Waters' reputation as an artist who fights for creative integrity. This wasn't about defending Ozzy's memory. This was about settling a score that apparently goes back to the Reagan administration. Industry sources are quietly suggesting that Tyler's explosive statement was just the opening move in something much bigger. Because Steven Tyler doesn't abandon 4 decades of chaotic authenticity for calculated warfare just to make a point about Roger Waters' character. He goes strategic when he has evidence, documentation, and a plan to completely destroy someone who's been getting away with systematic destruction for far too long. The American rock community is holding its breath, waiting to see what Tyler reveals next. Because if his opening statement was this devastating, what he's been keeping secret about Waters' campaign against American rock authenticity might completely rewrite how we understand the relationship between British progressive pretension and American rock honesty. Tyler's war against Roger Waters has officially begun, and based on his opening move, Waters has no idea what 4 decades of documented evidence is about to do to his carefully constructed legacy as rock music's intellectual conscience. This is just the beginning of Steven Tyler's methodical destruction of Roger Waters, and the American rock legend is about to prove that authentic passion will always defeat pretentious intellectualism when the gloves finally come off. The secret that Steven Tyler has been guarding for 42 years finally explains why his hatred of Roger Waters runs so deep, and it's not about musical differences or British versus American rock rivalry. This is about the most calculated act of industry sabotage in rock history, a systematic campaign so devastating that it nearly destroyed 2 of the most influential bands in rock music forever. It all started in the summer of 1981, when both Aerosmith and Black Sabbath were facing their darkest periods. Aerosmith was imploding from drug addiction and internal conflicts that had reduced them to playing half-empty clubs. Black Sabbath had just fired Ozzy Osbourne and was struggling to find their identity without their iconic frontman. Both bands were being written off by critics as dinosaurs whose time had passed, relics from the 70s that had no place in the emerging MTV generation. That's when Steven Tyler made a phone call that should have changed rock history. He reached out to Ozzy Osbourne, not as a competitor or fellow rock star, but as someone who understood exactly what it felt like to watch the industry try to bury you while you were still breathing. Tyler proposed something that had never been attempted before, a secret alliance between American and British rock authenticity that would prove genuine rock music could survive the industry's attempts to replace it with manufactured pop. Tyler's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. If Aerosmith and Black Sabbath could coordinate their comebacks, share resources, and support each other's creative revival, they could prove that authentic rock music was stronger than industry trends or critical dismissal. The alliance wasn't about business deals or commercial partnerships. It was about 2 legendary bands refusing to let the music industry bury rock and roll's authentic spirit. Ozzy's response was immediate and enthusiastic. He'd been feeling isolated and abandoned by an industry that seemed determined to forget everything he'd contributed to rock music. Tyler's offer of genuine brotherhood and mutual support gave Ozzy hope that his solo career could be more than just a desperate attempt to stay relevant. For the first time since leaving Sabbath, Ozzy felt like he had allies who understood what he was fighting for. The Tyler-Ozzy alliance started with simple gestures of mutual support. Tyler would call Ozzy before major performances, offering encouragement and strategic advice. Ozzy would share his experiences with solo career transitions, helping Tyler navigate Aerosmith's internal struggles. They began coordinating their touring schedules to avoid competing with each other, and even shared band members and production resources when possible. But the alliance quickly evolved into something much more sophisticated. Tyler and Ozzy realized they were fighting the same enemy, an industry establishment that wanted to replace authentic rock music with safer, more controllable alternatives. They started sharing intelligence about industry manipulation, coordinating their responses to critical attacks, and developing strategies to protect each other from systematic undermining. The alliance worked perfectly. By 1982, both bands were experiencing unprecedented revivals. Aerosmith's recovery from their drug-fueled collapse was being hailed as one of rock's greatest comebacks. Ozzy's solo career was exploding with Bark at the Moon and Shot in the Dark, proving that authentic rock energy could dominate MTV just as effectively as manufactured pop. The Tyler-Ozzy alliance had demonstrated that genuine rock authenticity was stronger than industry trends. That's when Roger Waters made the decision that would define his character forever. Instead of celebrating rock music's authentic revival, Waters saw the Tyler-Ozzy alliance as a threat to his carefully constructed position as rock music's intellectual leader. If American hard rock and British heavy metal could prove their artistic legitimacy through commercial success, it would undermine Waters' claims that progressive rock represented rock music's highest evolution. Waters' response was systematic and devastating. Using his industry connections and Pink Floyd's commercial influence, he began a coordinated campaign to undermine both the Tyler-Ozzy alliance and the individual careers of both artists. This wasn't just competitive rivalry or artistic disagreement. This was deliberate sabotage designed to destroy two careers that threatened Waters' narrative about rock music's proper direction. The sabotage started with tour opportunities. Waters used his influence with major venue operators and festival organizers to create conflicts that prevented Aerosmith and Black Sabbath from accessing the best touring opportunities. When both bands were offered headline slots at major festivals, Waters would arrange for Pink Floyd or Pink Floyd-affiliated acts to be scheduled at competing events, forcing promoters to choose between established progressive rock credibility and the risky authenticity of the Tyler-Ozzy alliance. Waters then targeted radio play, using his relationships with program directors and music journalists to characterize both Aerosmith's comeback and Ozzy's solo success as temporary nostalgia rather than legitimate artistic revival. He systematically fed information to critics about both bands' past struggles with drugs and internal conflicts, ensuring that their current success would always be framed as recovery from failure rather than genuine creative achievement. The most devastating part of Waters' campaign was how he attacked the alliance itself. He spread rumors throughout the industry that Tyler and Ozzy were using each other for commercial gain rather than genuine artistic support. He suggested that their mutual assistance was actually a desperate attempt by two failing artists to prop each other up, rather than a legitimate partnership between rock legends. Waters' systematic undermining campaign nearly destroyed both careers just as they were reaching new heights. By 1983, both Aerosmith and Black Sabbath were facing industry skepticism that had nothing to do with their music quality and everything to do with Waters' behind-the-scenes manipulation. The alliance that had saved both bands was being portrayed as evidence of their weakness rather than their strength. For 42 years, Tyler has watched Waters build a reputation as rock music's principled intellectual, knowing that Waters' entire legacy was built on destroying the authentic rock alliance that could have changed music history. And now, watching Waters attack Ozzy's memory after his death, Tyler finally understands that Waters' cruelty toward a dead man's legacy is exactly the same as his cruelty toward the Living Alliance in 1981, destroying authentic rock expression to protect his own inflated reputation. 72 hours after Steven Tyler's initial bombshell statement, he did something that nobody in the rock industry thought was possible. He didn't just make accusations about Roger Waters' systematic sabotage of the Tyler-Ozzy alliance. He opened his personal archives and started releasing documented evidence so damaging, so meticulously preserved, that Waters' entire reputation as rock music's principled intellectual is disintegrating in real time. The first devastating piece of evidence Tyler released was a collection of recorded phone conversations from 1982 and 1983, conversations that Tyler's team had apparently been monitoring and preserving for over 4 decades. These recordings capture Waters making statements about American rock music that are so elitist, so deliberately destructive, that they completely destroy his carefully crafted image as someone who respects authentic artistic expression. In one recording from March 1982, you can actually hear Waters telling a major festival promoter, "American rock bands like Aerosmith represent everything that's wrong with rock music's direction. They're evolutionary dead ends that appeal to the lowest common denominator. If we want rock music to mature as an art form, we need to stop giving these primitive noisemakers platforms that should be reserved for actual artists." That recording is dated just weeks after Aerosmith's comeback performance at the US festival, a performance that had been hailed by critics as one of rock's greatest revival moments. But Tyler didn't stop there. He released meeting transcripts from industry conferences where Waters actively lobbied against giving both Aerosmith and Black Sabbath major festival slots, arguing that their inclusion would damage the artistic credibility of events that should showcase rock music's intellectual evolution. These transcripts reveal Waters systematically working to deny both bands the exposure opportunities that could have accelerated their comebacks. In one transcript from a 1983 music industry conference, Waters can be read arguing, "Booking Aerosmith and Ozzy at the same festivals as Pink Floyd creates a false equivalency between authentic artistic achievement and manufactured crowd-pleasing noise. We're essentially telling audiences that screaming and guitar solos are just as valid as conceptual songwriting and thematic coherence." The transcripts get even more damaging when Waters starts discussing specific strategies for undermining both bands' commercial momentum. He wasn't just expressing artistic preferences, he was actively coordinating industry resistance to their success. Waters provided detailed analyses of both bands' financial vulnerabilities and suggested specific timing for industry pressure that would be most effective in disrupting their career revivals. Tyler then released something that sent shockwaves through the music journalism community, documented evidence of Waters' influence on rock criticism during the early 80s. Tyler's archive includes correspondence between Waters and major rock journalists, letters where Waters systematically shaped critical coverage of both Aerosmith and Black Sabbath to emphasize their past failures rather than their current achievements. In one letter to a Rolling Stone critic from 1982, Waters writes, "When reviewing Aerosmith's new material, it's important to context their current work within their history of drug abuse and creative inconsistency. Their temporary revival shouldn't be treated as genuine artistic growth, when it's clearly just nostalgia marketing targeted at audiences who prefer simplicity over sophistication." But Tyler saved his most devastating evidence for last: financial records showing that Waters used his industry influence to actively block both Aerosmith and Black Sabbath from accessing premium recording facilities and production resources during their crucial comeback periods. These documents reveal that Waters leveraged his relationships with major studios and producers to create artificial scarcity that made it harder for both bands to achieve the production quality their revivals deserved. The financial evidence shows that Waters didn't just passively disapprove of the Tyler-Ozzy alliance, he actively worked to sabotage their ability to compete commercially with his own projects. When both bands needed access to the same high-end production resources that Pink Floyd routinely used, Waters ensured those resources were either unavailable or prohibitively expensive. Tyler's evidence dump included witness statements from former studio engineers and industry executives who observed Waters' systematic campaign against both bands. These testimonies, signed and notarized decades ago but never released until now, detail exactly how Waters coordinated his sabotage activities while maintaining his public image as someone who respected all authentic rock music. One studio engineer's statement describes watching Waters personally call major facilities to advise them against working with either Aerosmith or Black Sabbath, claiming that their association with these declining acts would damage the studio's reputations with more prestigious clients. Another industry executive testifies about Waters offering Pink Floyd exclusive contracts to venues and promoters specifically to prevent them from booking the Tyler-Ozzy alliance. The most shocking revelation came when Tyler released internal Pink Floyd correspondence, where Waters discussed his anti-American rock campaign with other band members. These documents reveal that Waters' sabotage wasn't a spontaneous reaction to competition. This was a calculated, long-term strategy that Waters planned and executed with the full knowledge that he was destroying other artists' careers to protect Pink Floyd's market position. In one internal memo from 1983, Waters writes to his bandmates, "Our systematic exclusion of primitive American acts from major industry opportunities is working exactly as planned. Both Aerosmith and Ozzy are struggling to maintain momentum because they can't access the same resources and platforms we've secured. If we continue this pressure, their revivals will collapse and progressive rock will be established as the only legitimate evolution of rock music." The cumulative effect of Tyler's evidence release has been the complete destruction of Waters' credibility as someone who fights for authentic artistic expression. Every speech Waters has ever given about artistic integrity, every criticism he's made of commercially motivated musicians, every lecture about respecting rock music's authentic spirit, all of it is now exposed as hypocrisy from a man who built his career on systematically destroying the most authentic rock artists of his generation. Tyler's methodical destruction of Waters' reputation isn't just about settling an old score anymore. He's systematically proven that everything Waters claims to represent is a lie, and the evidence is so overwhelming that no one can defend Waters' character anymore. This isn't about American versus British rock, or hard rock versus progressive rock. This is about exposing a fraud who has been manipulating the entire rock industry for 4 decades, while pretending to be its moral conscience. Steven Tyler's systematic destruction of Roger Waters hasn't just exposed one man's decades of industry manipulation. It's triggered a complete revolution in how the music world understands power, authenticity, and the hidden forces that shaped rock history. And the earthquake Tyler unleashed is spreading far beyond anything he originally intended, fundamentally changing the relationship between American rock honesty and British progressive pretension forever. The immediate industry response to Tyler's evidence dump has been unprecedented in its speed and brutality. Within 72 hours, Pink Floyd's corporate partnerships began collapsing faster than anyone thought possible. 3 major streaming platforms quietly removed Pink Floyd from their Artists of Integrity playlists. Classic rock radio stations started issuing disclaimers before playing Waters-era Floyd material, distancing themselves from the band's association with their former bassist's systematic sabotage campaign. But the real revolution began when other American rock legends started coming forward with their own Roger Waters horror stories, revelations that Tyler's courage had finally given them permission to share. The floodgates opened, and what emerged was evidence of a pattern of behavior so toxic, so systematically anti-American, that it's forcing a complete reevaluation of Waters' entire career and his influence on rock music's cultural hierarchy. Joe Perry was the first to break his own decades of silence, revealing that Waters had approached him directly in 1984, trying to convince him that Tyler was creatively exhausted and that Aerosmith would be better off with a more intellectually sophisticated frontman. Perry now realizes that Waters was trying to destroy the partnership between Aerosmith's founding members, probably to prevent them from ever achieving the kind of authentic American rock success that threatened progressive rock's claims of artistic superiority. The revelation from Hart's Ann and Nancy Wilson was even more devastating. They disclosed that Waters had spent years in the 80s telling other musicians and industry executives that American rock bands were incapable of artistic growth and represented a cultural dead end that would eventually be replaced by more sophisticated European influences. These comments weren't just casual opinions. They were part of a coordinated campaign to position American rock as inherently inferior to British progressive music. But the most shocking disclosure came from surviving members of Lynyrd Skynyrd, who revealed that Waters had actively worked to prevent their post-tragedy reunion from gaining industry support in the late 70s and early 80s. Waters had convinced key industry figures that Southern rock represented the worst aspects of American cultural backwardness and should be marginalized to protect rock music's intellectual credibility. The pattern that emerged from these revelations was clear and devastating. Waters hadn't just targeted the Tyler-Ozzy alliance. He had systematically worked to undermine every major American rock act that threatened his carefully constructed narrative about rock music's proper evolution. This wasn't about artistic quality or musical preferences. This was about cultural imperialism disguised as artistic criticism. Industry insiders are now revealing that Waters' anti-American rock campaign was part of a much larger strategy to position British progressive music as the sole legitimate heir to rock music's artistic credibility. By systematically undermining American rock's attempts at industry recognition, Waters ensured that progressive rock would be seen as the only intellectually serious form of rock music, with British bands naturally positioned as its leaders. The evidence suggests that Waters deliberately created a false cultural hierarchy in rock music, positioning British progressive acts as sophisticated artists while characterizing American rock as primitive entertainment. This wasn't just musical snobbery. It was strategic cultural manipulation designed to consolidate artistic credibility and commercial success within the British progressive rock scene that Waters could influence and control. Tyler's evidence has revealed that Waters spent decades actively working to prevent American rock from gaining mainstream critical respect, not because he genuinely believed it was inferior music, but because he understood that American rock's authentic emotional power posed a direct threat to progressive rock's claims of intellectual superiority. Waters needed American rock to remain critically marginalized to protect his own position as rock music's cultural arbiter. The music journalism community is now scrambling to reevaluate decades of coverage that may have been influenced by Waters' systematic manipulation. Major publications are discovering that some of their most respected critics had received guidance from Waters about how to position American rock in relation to British progressive music, guidance that shaped the entire critical narrative around both scenes for decades. Rolling Stone magazine has quietly begun reviewing their archives, looking for evidence of Waters' influence on their coverage of American rock bands during the crucial 80s period. Early reports suggest that Waters had significant behind-the-scenes influence on how major publications covered Aerosmith, Heart, Lynyrd Skynyrd, and other American rock acts during their peak years, always positioning them as less artistically significant than their British progressive counterparts. But Tyler's revolution has unleashed something even more powerful than historical revisionism. The surviving American rock legends are now coordinating their own response to decades of systematic cultural undermining, and what they're planning makes Tyler's attack on Waters look like a gentle opening statement. Sources close to the situation report that Tyler, Perry, the Wilson sisters, and other American rock survivors are planning a joint statement that will expose the full extent of how Waters manipulated the rock music narrative to suppress American artistic contributions. This isn't just about defending their own legacies. It's about reclaiming the cultural recognition that Waters systematically denied American rock for decades. The most significant long-term consequence of Tyler's revelation is how it's changing the power dynamics within rock music's established cultural hierarchy. For 40 years, British progressive rock has been positioned as more artistically important than American rock authenticity. But Tyler's evidence proves that this positioning was artificially created through systematic cultural manipulation, rather than genuine artistic superiority. Major music festivals are already beginning to reorganize their historical presentations, giving American rock pioneers the recognition that Waters' manipulation had previously denied them. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is reportedly reviewing their historical exhibits to ensure they accurately represent American rock's contributions without the distortion of Waters' decades-long cultural influence campaign. Tyler's strategic timing has been absolutely perfect. He waited until Waters had already damaged his own reputation with the Ozzy attack, then struck when Waters was most vulnerable and least able to mount an effective defense. But more importantly, Tyler waited until the cultural climate was ready to reject the kind of elitist manipulation that Waters had successfully practiced for decades. The revolution Tyler unleashed isn't just about Roger Waters anymore. It's about fundamentally rewriting the cultural hierarchy of rock music, giving American rock authenticity the recognition it deserves, and ensuring that no artist can ever again manipulate the industry's cultural narrative the way Waters did for 4 decades. Tyler has proven that authentic American rock spirit will always triumph over pretentious cultural manipulation when the truth finally comes to light. His 40-year wait for the perfect moment has resulted in the complete destruction of his enemy and the liberation of American rock from systematic cultural oppression. Subscribe immediately for exclusive updates on Tyler's war against Waters that's rewriting rock history. Hit that notification bell because industry insiders promise more devastating revelations about Waters' systematic betrayal of American rock authenticity. Comment below. Was Tyler's 40-year wait for perfect revenge the ultimate power move, or should he have exposed Waters' cultural manipulation decades ago?